In our comments, one of our viewers says, I'm leaning more towards realism while painting a landscape when I want to do more abstracted landscape. Can you give some advice or tips on how to abstract a landscape? Let's do some abstracting. In fact, you're dealing with the same things when you're abstracting as you should be dealing with realistically. Often when we're painting realistically, we're so tied up on what the image is, we don't really see what it's made of. In abstraction, the only thing that's different is that you're focused on the visual elements, the things that make up that thing you're seeing. And what are they? Line, shape, value, color, texture, size, and direction. That's all. Everything is made up of a combination of these things or a combination of most of these things. So as abstractionists usually focus on one thing or using one of the elements, or sometimes two or three of the elements, to compose a painting with just the focus on that element. So a good way to approach landscape in abstraction to get you started is to look at it in terms of what do you see, which of these elements do you see? What do you see and what are they doing? And that's very, very important. And so if we begin with line, line usually talks about the edges. It also is an indicator of direction, but it's usually referring to edges of shapes that we see, and we don't see really significant stuff going on with line there. But shape is a different matter. We see a huge, large, dark shape that has irregular edges moving in and out. So we can see this whole area here as one single shape. And we can see another, actually about two single shapes down here, smaller and larger. And then if you look in the light area where the sun rays are hitting, you see other, you could say a mass. This is a single shape. These are smaller shapes. So what about value? You see value plays a really, really strong role in this scene. The strong value contrast, the very, very dark against the very, very light. So we've got already two things we can emphasize there. We can emphasize shape, the shapes that we're seeing, not in terms of what they're defining, but in terms of just their shape, where those boundaries are that create that shape. Value contrast is one of the most important tools we can use in creating any painting composition, and that simply means to what degree. We've got all these values here. What do we see here that we see here? And how are they different from each other? Color. Color's not really emphasized here, but color is an important element. Mostly green, mostly yellow-green. The very, very light yellow greens we see in the distance, and the darker, actually they're kind of yellow, but they're leaning a little bit more towards the cooler green that we see in front. Texture. We do see texture as an important thing here. Size. We see a variation in size. We see smaller light shapes against larger dark shapes. In some cases we see some smaller dark shapes. And then direction. Which way are these things moving? We see a strong directional movement in this direction right here. You squint, you can see that shadow area moving like that. We have a direction, kind of a nice little horizontal direction there, and some verticals here. So which of those would be emphasized? Now that's the choice you make. You know, you could take this scene and you could do dozens of abstractions from it just by focusing on something different that you see happening in here with each one. I'm going just to take shape, value, and color, just those three, and I will pay attention to direction. I'll pay attention to size. I probably won't pay a lot of attention to texture. I'll just not consider texture important here. So texture and line I won't be emphasizing. But my main guiding elements of this will be shape, value, and color. Now, what do I need in order to do that? I've got the value scale set up here. I need this reference, becoming aware what's happening with values, deep value contrast here. So I'll just keep that right there to refer to. I need the colors I'm seeing, or if I wanted to emphasize those colors in a different direction, I could. So I need the colors I'm seeing. I have set up on my palette here the colors that will give me what I'm seeing and variations. So I'm seeing these yellow greens. I've got a yellow green from the darkest dark, middle green, and middle yellow green, and light yellow green set up on the palette. That's the way I like to set up my palette, so I can more easily move from one value area to the other. I have a red violet here. You don't see that. Well, you just see a little bit right here, but I can use it to help control that saturation of that yellow green. If I need a little bit more neutral in some areas, or if I can use that then. And I have a blue line, ultramarine blue. So this is a mixture of Rembrandt Viridian, and Rembrandt transparent oxide red. This yellow green. This is quinacridone violet, and made by Utrecht. And then the yellow part of this is this mixture mixed with Utrecht's Hansa Yellow Light. And then this is the Gamlin Ultramarine Blue, just with 3 values created with white. That's all I need. It's a good idea to, if you're just beginning abstraction, in order to get a real handle on what color can do, start out with a limited palette. So the kind of limited palette I've used here, if you look at the color wheel, yellow-green, I've used a complementary palette of yellow-green, its complement red-violet, that are these two, and now I've put a third color on here that they both have in common. So yellow-green has blue in it, red-violet has blue in it, so that's why the blue is on the palette. So I've limited it to 3, where I chose a color scheme, and there are about a dozen you can choose from, where I chose a color scheme, and then I chose a third color that is present in all the colors I'd already chosen in that scheme. So that's just one way of working it out. So all right, so how do we get started? I'm going to underline shape, value, and color. Those are the 3 things I'm concerned about. I will be concerned somewhat with direction, size, different sizes of shape, but the real emphasis will be shape, value, and color. Okay, so now, if you really want to abstract, you don't really even need to sketch ahead of time. But you can begin with almost any place. You pay attention where you see things located here, and then make a decision. Do you want to locate them in corresponding areas here? That is when, especially if you're out on location and doing this, you can do this sort of thing with your fingers and isolate where the scene will end on each side and where it will end on top and bottom. Just that sort of thing. Or you could do that sort of thing. All right. So now, this is going to be a very quick little demonstration for you, just to show you how to get going on this. So I'm going to begin. I'll just begin with this dark here. And all I'm doing, it is not trees. I am not concerned with trees. If you're trying to make a tree, that's leaning you towards realism, not towards abstraction. So you got to forget that it's trees. Just look at the shape and the value. The shape and the value. All right, so the color of that shape and value, we have a very, very dark, right in here I have a very, very dark green, yellow green that's really cool, leaning towards blue. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into my darkest yellow green. I'm going to pull a little bit of that middle value yellow green, so that I'll be working more in this area of dark. It's a good thing to stay in the beginning of the abstraction. It's a good thing to stay with your darkest darks about in this range here, and save the darkest darks for accent towards the end. So I like to start a little bit lighter than what I'm really seeing. Now if I were there, I would not see it that dark anyway. Alright, so now I've done that. Now I'm going to come down here and cool that with some blue. Just a little bit. Now I'm getting a lot of that paint in my brush because I want to be able to go go quite a distance with that brush. Now see that I reached for too much of that middle value blue. And let's see, all right, I'm still in pretty much in that value area. I come back up in here. I'm going to reach for just a touch of the red violet in it. And that's going to give me a feeling of a very, very dark green. So what I'm going to do, just going to place it where I see it. Now, the kind of brush strokes you use, I think go by spontaneity. Just however your brush feels like moving. That may sound elusive, but it's just one. If this is moving in this way, well, you can make your brush strokes move in that way. So you kind of respond spontaneously to what you see going on there. Now you see here the paint is not very well mixed, so I'm getting already some little variations in those dark values, which is wonderful, which you enjoy seeing. Now I'm just going to watch what's happening, and I'm seeing this move in this direction right here, so I'll just keep moving it, and I'm seeing this shape get a little bit larger as it moves in this direction right over here. And it keeps going, and it keeps going. And I'll keep doing a little bit of variation in the colors I'm picking up. It keeps going till it gets about right in here, and then it gets wider down here. As it gets wider down here, it's getting cooler and a little darker and a little bit more neutralized. So I'll just do that and keep it moving in that direction. Let's put a little bit more of that neutral in there. Seeing that get, oh, nice. You see, by adding that red violet in there, that does that really nice little accent of dark. And then as it gets down here, I can choose to make that shape do kind of what I see this shape doing right here. And then as it's moving over here, I see those dark values doing a similar thing. And I'll just let my brush imitate what I'm seeing. Let the movement of the brush indicate the direction I see those shapes turning. In which I see those shapes turning. Okay, so I like that variation I'm getting there. As I move up, I'm looking at not only just the shape now, but I'm beginning to look at more value variation as it's moving up, and how the color begins to change. Those three things, shape, value, and color. The values are getting a little bit lighter in that dark area. The values are getting a little bit lighter, and the colors begin to pick up more of that middle value yellow-green. So I'll just do that, and it's moving. This is continuing to move in pretty much the same direction. Let's make that even a little bit lighter, and we can even pull over here into that light pile. As long as we don't get it darker than middle value, it will still read the value we're seeing. Okay, good. Now I can do that. And let's just begin to really abstract now as we're moving here. Really abstract that thing that we're seeing and move it up even more. Let's get it just a little bit cooler. Just a tiny bit lighter, maybe a little bit cooler. I'm going by what I see right here in terms of value and color, and let that direction sort of do something like this. And that's sort of what I see, and it's sort of tapering off in this direction right here, kind of like that. Now I'm seeing another dark shape that's sort of going in this direction. That will be nice for balance, because that'll be a movement moving this way and another movement countering it in that direction. I see that lighter, so that's closer to that middle value. I'm going to make that just a tiny bit cooler, add a little bit of blue to it, and so that one then is moving more like this. In this direction, just like that. Now I've got this thing going on, this shape. I've got a movement here, so I see that movement's beginning to play, or direction is beginning to play a little bit more of a role than I anticipated. That's okay. That can be a positive thing, because movement is very important. So I'm going to pick up on that, and let's see what's going on here. There's some small little movements of dark going on up in here, smaller movements of dark going up in here, and where else do I see smaller? So I'm seeing now this direction, and that direction of shape movement is beginning to play a role. If I feel that I'm beginning to observe something else that's playing a role, then I include that. And that's part of abstraction. This is your subject matter. These are your images. This is your subject matter right here. And so whatever is happening here is important. It's the important thing that you're working with. Okay, now where's that going? That is going behind, or it's touching this shape. So we'll just let it touch that shape. And we're going to keep this sort of organic, meaning it's not going to have it's not going to have geometric shape. So I could even work this, let this kind of disappear in this direction right here. Even though I don't see it, I see some little indication that might do that. But that's something we can do that will be abstracting. Abstracting, we're pulling information from what's in front of us and we're interpreting it. All right, so let's see what else we can do. And while we're still in that dark, and still giving variation to that dark, and I'm going to move right up in here, and let's get that even. Let's start moving that more towards middle value because we see it doing that. So I'm going to reach over for the light there and begin to cool it a little bit and let it move more towards middle value as it begins to move right here. And let's see what can happen there. And we begin to see a little bit of value contrast. That's a very close value contrast that we begin to see happening right there. And we'll leave enough open for those lights to come through. So a good reason to work with the darks first is that you can have then the lights that are left to kind of guide you as to where you'll want your lights to go. And so we can now begin to sort of close some shapes in. I think I'm just going to go a little bit faster now. And what I could do at this point, I could let this be the core of the abstracting and begin to deviate from this just a little bit. I pulled already the major information I need from this, so I could just sort of begin to deviate from that just a little bit. Do I really want to do that? I don't know the answer to that yet, but I want to keep this still in that shadow range, what would be the shadow range that we're seeing, but ends up, we call it middle value when we're painting it. I see a little bit of that going on right here, which doesn't hurt. Let's just mix that in with what's already there and let that little diagonal movement there. And what are we going to do this stuff down here? I think just take what's in the brush, most of that is middle value, middle to light. And so I'm going to sort of neutralize that green by pulling that red violet into it, but let it still be a little bit green and let it still be a little bit on the cool side. And you see how that happens. That's a beautiful thing that we can do with color. And let's just let this be a horizontal shape, just that moves across right in here. And we might just let it do the same thing. Let's let it we don't have to follow exactly what we're seeing there. We're building that relationship. So we'll just pull that across there. Nice little horizontal shape. And I have gone over the edges there, so that all of that would not be in the painting. I like how that went cooler there, so we'll just let it go a little bit cooler over here. We might pick up on that idea of cool, because in abstract painting, even in realistic paintings, a lot of times things happen that you didn't predict or didn't try to control, and you want to pick up on them rather than to neglect them. We got a little bit of that bluer green coming through there, a little bit of the bluer green coming through there. So I think why not emphasize that? Let's go into the middle value bluer green. I think at this point, well, may say I want this to stay. We need that dark. We need that bigger light shape here. We don't need to do what we see there. We need that bigger light shape here in order to have that strong direction and contrast of size. So I think what I'm going to do now is to move more. Change my mind just a little bit. Move into the light now and begin to create the light areas. I'm going to move into the light yellow green, very, very light. That ends up being about a value 2 to 3 right there. Now let's see, do I need it no, I want it cooler. So I'm going to move into the blue and we'll cool that a little bit. Now if we were doing realistic painting, we would, well, some of that would happen in realistic painting, but not a whole lot. So, okay, so what I'm going to do here, and I'm not going to try to stay in lines. I want that to belong, to blend with. So I might just do something like this, and even this. And then let's get some variation. Let's pull some more light in here. Give some variation. Even get some real strong value contrast here, because we see that strong value contrast of the white canvas against that dark paint. So that we want to keep. And so we will just, now let's change the direction and have the emphasis, some emphasis going in here. Well, that turned a little bit darker than I wanted it to, so I'll just pull some lighter color on into it. And this one does really need to be light. So I want that cool. I want to cool that just a little bit and maybe make it a little bit lighter by reaching into the white, work it in the brush really good, and let's see what we can do here. I'll be careful as I place that I place it without picking up that dark beside it. You see all I'm doing there is just manipulating the brush to let that light, oh yes, that's a nice low value contrast there. I might even extend it just a little bit and maybe pick it up a little bit here. It wouldn't hurt to just come down and emphasize a little bit of that in the light. And the abstraction is almost done, at least temporarily done. So I'm going to just keep this. I'm going to avoid having very much variation in the light portion of it at all. I'll let the more of the variation be in the dark part, and I'll just use these shapes, the light shapes, pretty much as I created them when I set up the dark shapes, and allow them to play the same role that they played while I was setting up the dark shapes. And so this is just one way of abstracting, because there are hundreds and hundreds, maybe more than that, of ways of abstracting. But to get started on how to abstract means that you're getting started by using or referring to or being conscious of just those visual elements, and those are the things that you're working with, of course, along with your brush strokes and your color mixing and that sort of thing. But it's the actual visual elements here that are doing the work. They are what this is about. It's not about do you see a landscape in this? Some people might see something else. It doesn't matter. That's not your consideration. Your consideration is to create a well-balanced, unified in color, harmonious in color, unified in shape, abstraction of what you see. Now I'll give one little final, let's get this worked in here and here, and then I want to give one little final assessment to see if it's balanced. And it does feel a little bit overpowering. The light in here does feel that it's overpowering that light shape, just a little bit overpowering the dark. Now what I'll do there in that case is re-emphasize the dark. You see, it feels ambiguous now. We don't know whether there seems to be kind of an equal amount of light and dark. And so what I'm going to do is go back into the dark, and this time I'm going to reach into the darkest dark because it's going to mix with that light. When I put it on the canvas, I'm going to pull some of that blue in it, a little bit of that red violet in it, and I'm going to re-emphasize dark right there. And let's see where else. And this time I'll be careful. I'll go back to the reference and say, okay, where do I see dark that I can add to that to let the dark part be the dominant direction creator, the dominant theme of this entire abstraction. And so I keep working that, just the dark, keep finding places to put that dark until it feels balanced to me. And that is the balance thing is a little bit intuitive, but it works the same way as any kind of balance scale. If one area feels that it's tilting a little bit more in a direction than the other, it's out of balance. And so I'll add a little bit more of the dark in between in here, and let's see what needs to happen. Maybe a tiny bit of accent of dark in here. And you can watch with every bit of dark I put in there, you can see it changing that visual balance. Well, let's just come down in here and add a little bit of that right in here. Don't want that to get out of context there. A little bit maybe here. And then let's pull the eye back into it by adding a little bit of a dark shape there. Now, let's see. That seems relatively balanced to me. And I would say at this point, I would live with it for a little while. I might tweak it just a little bit, but I certainly am going to try to make it look like this. This is a point where you look at the abstraction itself, and you're responding just to the abstraction itself, unless you feel that you don't know which way to go. So you want to look, maybe squint at the scene. Are there darks there that are doing something that I could use here to strengthen the design of the thing? Or are there shapes here that are larger than here that I would want to pick up on? You see, the dark shape here is larger in proportion to the lighter area. I have less of the dark shape here, so it could be that I might need to pick up on that. And so if I look back over there and get that information and say, okay, I really do need to reinforce the dark shapes here a little bit more. I've been reinforcing them, but maybe I would want to reinforce it just a little bit more. And then you make your decision like that. But when it reaches a point where it feels balanced, it feels unified, it feels harmonious, then why do any more? So try that, all of you who are painting realistic or abstractly. If you're painting realistically, if that's your thing, and you don't think you care anything about abstraction, you'd be surprised how doing some abstracted studies would enhance your ability to paint realistically, because it will sharpen your observation. So give that a try. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell, so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianeMize.com, where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.